Hello, everyone. Welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. We don't have all the answers, but we're going to have a great conversation. And I am delighted to let everyone know that our good friend, Scott Harwell, is back from Israel. And we have a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about Hamas. We're going to talk about Gog-Magog and many other things related to what is happening in Israel. Now, guys, we'd love it if you would subscribe, if you'd hit the like button, share this. That's how this gets bigger. All right, and we'd love to see this just blow up. So that'd be fantastic. So, Scott, Baruch haba, welcome back to the United States. Boy, you were there about 2 weeks, and
About 3 weeks.
about 3 weeks. Okay,
Yeah.
and you just barely got out. It sounds like. So
Well,
kind of tell us what was happening. I
yeah,
mean,
the plan was to return on Sunday with a nice little flight, direct flight from Tel Aviv to Atlanta, and but I was down in Eilat. I left the tour. I was finally able to get my rental car, which I could not get the first 6 days because Dum Dum didn't renew his license. And so nobody would rent me a car at first. So my plans for the first 6 days got nixed, and instead of doing my little tour on the front end for 6 days and kind of doing a tour to Israel, I was in Jerusalem, which isn't a bad place to get stuck, but it got old after about 5 or 6 days. I think I walked all the way around Jerusalem and saw a bunch of stuff, but then I joined the tour, and I think it was on Thursday. I was able to rent a car on Wednesday, and on Thursday I did my little northern tour of Israel. I saw the gates of hell. I went and saw Tel Dan. That places I had not been on my previous trip, but I wanted to see it. And then I kind of just did a tour to Israel, and went back down to the desert, slept there that night in Tamar, biblical Tamar, and then I drove to the next morning to Eilat and enjoyed Eilat, kind of like a resort area. And I woke up Saturday morning, and as I'm leaving, the hotel manager comes and gets me. She goes, "You might want to check for road closures." I'm like, "What? What's going on?" She said, "Yeah, there's been an attack." And so I had no sirens went off or anything. So
yeah,
I
of course,
checked.
that's very south there in Eilat. I mean, you're a ways from Gaza, but still, Israel's a small country.
It is.
People don't realize how small Israel is. It's about the size of what they say New Jersey or maybe Rhode Island or something. I mean, it's incredibly small when you start looking at it. It's about, I think, 180 some miles long. And at the narrowest point, it's about 7-8 miles wide. I mean,
Up in the north, yes, and down in the south, those two areas it is. And I went to Mount Hermon. I missed the little trolley to go to the very top by like 5 minutes, and so I just around, and then because I wanted to go to the top of Mount Hermon, and then I think from the maps it would be like a 6-hour drive without traffic from Mount Hermon, the very most northern part of Israel, down to Eilat, which is the most southern part of Israel. So it's a very small country. Yeah. And so I wasn't. I'm certainly within rocket range, but I'm assuming that Hamas didn't launch any rockets toward Eilat. That's just probably not on their number one of hit list, if you will. But anyway, it was. I was pretty calm. My wife was freaking out because we discussed this recently before we came on the air, that she had told me several times, "Are you sure you want to go? You know, you're a prophecy geek and you think that something might actually happen during these biblical feast days." And I said, "Well, yeah, it could. It might." And then when all this happened, she was not a happy camper with me. So having to bunker down in a hotel room as rockets were flying and everything. So
that's a very different experience. I mean, I lived there back in the 90s, late 90s, and there were some bus bombings. I remember a Sbarro was blown up. So it was very sad stuff. There was some loss of life, but relatively small compared to what we're dealing with now. And there were never any missiles flying while I was there. So you had a very different experience than what I had. I can just imagine that's quite surreal. And you were at the airport as well when there were rockets flying. Is that right?
Yes. I was able. None of the American airlines flew after Saturday, so all the flights were canceled. Even when I tried to rebook through Delta, it got canceled. Air Canada got canceled. My Turkish flight got canceled. So I don't know how I heard this, but I knew that Ethiopian was still flying. So I booked on Ethiopian Airlines and had to fly to Ethiopia. But while I was there, it was supposed to take off like around, it was supposed to take off around 2:30 or 3. And so obviously I got to the airport early. And then as I'm sitting there waiting, we had a little WhatsApp group text chain going on. She said, by the way, Hamas just launched a bunch of rockets your way, So
Oh, wow.
they all knew I was in the airport. And so the plane obviously was delayed taking off. I was sitting there and I heard at least one no doubt explosion. I mean, everybody in the airport kind of jumped. I don't know if it was from a rocket getting shot down, above near the airport, or if something landed near the airport. But it was pretty freaky. I'll put it that way.
Wow.
I don't envy those living in Israel right now. Especially, I was more concerned if Hezbollah got involved, because what I understand from the reports, they actually have guided rockets. They have much more sophisticated weapons than Hamas does in the Gaza Strip. And if they started sending drones, so
let's dig into this a little bit about Hamas. So the word actually means violence in Hebrew. I'm not entirely sure what it means in Arabic, though it might be similar. But the entire charter of the Hamas organization is the destruction, annihilation of Israel. So it's really hard to make peace with somebody who wants to kill you. Like, that's their whole reason for existing, is to wipe out Israel. Okay, why are they so gung-ho on wiping out Israel? Well, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. Obviously there were people living in the land, a lot of people. And let's make it clear that from the time of the Second Jewish Revolt, around 135 AD, under Caesar Hadrian, he was so ticked off at the Jews that they revolted again, right? This is 65 years after Titus came in and destroyed the temple and all that. The Jews revolted again, 135 AD, and Hadrian came in. He put them down. This is under the time of Simon Bar Kokhba, and it was Rabbi Akiva that was proclaiming him to be the Messiah. Of course, he wasn't. So anyway, Hadrian salted the land. He told the Jews, don't come back on pain of death. He changed the name of Jerusalem to Aelia Capitolina. He changed the name of Judea to Palestine, right? And that's where we get the name. So it has been Palestine for the last 2,000 years. Why did he call it the whole area Palestine? To rub salt in their wounds, basically, because he knew that the Philistines were the ones that were a thorn in the flesh to Israel all those years. And then, the Jews became a thorn in his side. And so he wanted to kind of return the favor. And so he renamed it to Palestine. All right. So if you look at the maps from roughly the last 2,000 years, they have, on that area, it's called Palestine. And, there was a lot of people were living there. You had Christians living there for some time. Obviously, you have Helena, Constantine's mother. She came in, in the 4th century, and she started just kind of pointing and said, well, this happened over here and that happened over there. And, still some of those places are tourist sites today, whether they're the real place or not. They're still tourist sites. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which in my opinion is not the actual place, but hey, what it is at the moment. And that's thanks to her and a number of other places. The Temple Mount really became a trash heap because nobody cared about it. And then around, the 600s is when the Muslims were then more power, and they took over and they cleaned it up and converted it into the Dome of the Rock, and then later the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So, they worked hard to try to create this myth, and many Muslims do not accept this, but especially the ones in Jerusalem are trying to, have this whole idea that Jerusalem is Islam's third holiest site after Mecca and Medina. Then they would talk about Jerusalem. In fact, in in Arabic, they call it El Quds, which means the holy place. Quds meaning same as Kadosh, and so that's kind of the mythology. And then, according to the myth, that it was from Jerusalem that Muhammad, rode his horse. What is it, lightning? I think it is, up into the sky and whatever, something or other. So that's part of the mythology. All right, so that kind of did it stick? I don't know. Who knows? But in any event, you do have the Dome of the Rock there, and the Jordanians, have had some influence there. And so now, when we talk about the Palestinian territory, there are kind of three different areas. You have what's known as the West Bank. It's called the West Bank because it is west of the country of Jordan. It's actually east of Israel, and that's what creates a little bit of confusion. Like, wait, how can this be the West Bank when it's east? But it's to the west of Jordan, and so that's the idea, that it's on the West Bank of the Jordan River from the perspective of Jordan. And so that name in and of itself is already a kind of a slap in the face, saying, hey, we belong to Jordan. And a lot of the Palestinians used to have Jordanian passports. Some still do. So they kind of have a little thing going on where they have kind of the citizenship with the Jordanians and whatnot. Then you have the Gaza Strip down to the south and on the coast. And then you have an area up in the north, in the Galilee area. So those are the three different pockets of the Palestinian territory. Now, the Palestinians, now let's go back just for a second, because when the British came in, there were at that, at the late part of the 1800s, there were a lot more Jews that were coming into the area. Of course, then the British took control of it, and even more Jews. You had Lord Rothschild, who wrote a letter saying that it'd be great if the Jews had their own homeland. And this eventually became a mandate of the British government that the Jews should have a homeland, and so that it started. But again, they were all called Palestinians. All right, that's what's really interesting about this. Jews and Arabs, Muslims, whatever, they were all Palestinians.
What's the other religion? Druze. There's a big up in northern Israel. There's a big
the Druzim. Yeah, I think the Druzim or Druze. That's a form of Islam.
Sort of.
Yeah. I mean, it's more Islam than it is Judaism, right? So but it's not as I'm not an expert on that. So so from the Palestinians' perspective, the modern day Palestinians, they feel that they were kind of kicked out of their homes, that the Jews came in and just started pushing them around. From the Jews' perspective, many would say, no, we bought the land, we worked the land. It started to come alive when we came back, which I lean more, obviously, much more on the Jewish side of things. But again, it's never quite that easy, right? It's not that everything was done perfectly. It's not that the Jews were always the good guys and the Palestinians were always the bad guys. That's not the case.
If you study the history, there were Jewish terrorists that were bombing. I think they bombed the British embassy, or they bombed something. They killed a lot of people, and I think that's when Britain had enough and said, "We're out of here."
Right.
And it was happening from both sides, both the Muslims and some of the Jewish terrorists. So there's no. This is never going to get worked out until Yeshua returns.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
This goes back to Abraham, him not trusting Yah, and deciding to listen to his wife. That was one time he shouldn't listen to her, and then we get Ishmael, right. and then we then you follow the line further down the family tree, and then you have Jacob and Esau. So, and then you've got so. This is no UN treaty. No politicians are going to resolve this conflict. Even if we can talk about that in a little bit. Even if we think we have some covenant or peace treaty that's going to settle this issue, it's not going to get settled.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. And that's what makes it complicated, And so I think it's really easy for us to sometimes say, well, Israel is 100% correct. I would say they're probably 85% correct in my assessment. And I do think that Israel would love to have peace. They really would give up a slice of land if they could have true lasting peace. But the tricky part is that they're kind of dealing with a snake here, because it's in the nature of the snake to bite you, and it's in the nature of the Palestinian territory or the Palestinian Authority, especially Hamas, which is an organization within the Palestinian Authority, to seek for the utter destruction, annihilation of Israel. Okay, so it's
from
hard
the
to sit
river.
down and have talks when the guy sitting across from you wants nothing more than to kill you and rub you out of existence. I mean, how do you ever have any kind of discussion
Well, and
on that?
that's been the history of it. I mean, I was talking with you about it, and I put a post. I've unfriended, blocked probably about 20 or 30 people with their, like, my wife got attacked for saying she supported Israel. She now understands that she's grafted into Israel, and what she meant is she supports the nation state of Israel and the Jews that live there and their rights to live in peace. But again, I agree with you, Doug. I don't think that the nation state of Israel, the Jewish people that live there now, I think they would love to have peace. No doubt they would love to have peace. But as you said, there is the true believers of Islam, the ones that actually, read the
Take it
book
seriously. Yeah.
and take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that focus on those verses, there's no negotiating.
Kill a Jew behind every rock and tree, and all that
there's
kind
no
of stuff.
negotiating with them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're true believers in certain of those verses, the way they interpret it and the way their imams interpret it. And so, again, I don't believe that what happened in 1948, 49, when the UN declared the modern nation state of Israel was fulfillment of prophecy, but I 100% agree that for Zechariah to be fulfilled, Zechariah 10 through 14, which are entirely Judah-centric passages, Judah, the house of Judah, had to be in the land. And we both know that the way that our brothers in Judah determine who is Jewish is completely the opposite of the way the Bible says. I mean, it's by patriarchy, not matriarchy. But if your daddy is, if your mama is a Gentile now of the nations, and your daddy is 100% Jewish, you're not Jewish. and so I disagree with them on how they even determine who is Jewish or not. And we're all a bunch of mutts right now anyway. For all I know, my great times 150 granddaddy, he could have been, Caleb, who wasn't even Jewish to begin with, but he got grafted in. I mean, we just don't know what all happened. But what I'm seeing is post by so-called believers who now understand that they're Israel. They've been influenced by these teachers who are now calling all Jews fake Jews, or they're believing this British Israelite nonsense. I'm gonna go against the white man first. That the Europeans are the true Jews, and then you've got the African. It's growing like mushrooms amongst Africans who they're not denying Yeshua. They're putting their faith in Yeshua. They're now actually returning to keeping Shabbat and the feast and things of that nature. But with that is this anti-Jewish, calling them fake Jews, the synagogue of Satan, and it makes my blood boil, because maybe at the very top there's a satanic conspiracy, and we all agree on this. We know what's going to happen at the end, and there is a satanic conspiracy. But do you think your average rabbi or the 99.99% of the people that I encountered in Israel are part of that? No. And yet it's like this blinded by race, by religion, that again, it's not going to get solved until Yeshua returns. So
yeah. And let's make it really clear that when we talk about Commonwealth theology, we are not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that we are replacing the Jewish people. What we're suggesting is we are joining into this greater thing. Okay. And part of it is our nomenclature, Scott, is, for many years I held this view, because I heard it from all these other teachers, that Israel equals the Jews equal Israel. And I thought they were one and the same. And only later did I really, put two and two together. And I'm like, oh my goodness, wait a second. There is the house of Judah and there's the house of Israel, right? And this is sometimes known as two-house theology. I really don't entirely subscribe to that either, because the people that are in the two-house theology start to get uppity, and they're like, I've got just as much right as any Jew, in fact, maybe more, and they're kind of jerks. But what God has intended to do, and He's told us, like in the book of Ezekiel, it's all over the place. I mean, He's talking all the time about the house of Israel, the house of Judah, house of Israel, house of Judah. The prophet Hosea is talking about these two houses. Jeremiah, the new covenant, for whoever's sake, right? The new covenant, behold, I make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, right? I mean, it's all over the place. And yet most of our Christian theology glosses right over this.
Well,
so what we're talking about is that the house of Judah, the Jews, and the house of Israel are coming back together. And that has been the big plan, has to put them back together. That's kind of the mystery that Paul was talking about, and other things as well. So,
and I did a post. It's almost like some of these, I'm going to just call them Hebrew uprooters that would make Hitler, the Russian Tsar pogroms, and Martin Luther all proud. And I'm using that very facetiously and sarcastically. It's like they just like Roman Catholicism and replacement theology. It's like they've completely forgotten about what Romans 11 says. And if they get arrogant toward the natural branches, and again, I don't give a rat's butt if a person doesn't have Jewish blood in them. It does not matter. People, I mean, I'm sorry, but there were millions killed in the Holocaust. There were hundreds of thousands killed in the Russian pogroms. Look what the Roman Catholic Church did in the Inquisitions and forcing Jews to convert. Eat this pig, give up Shabbat, or we'll kill you. I mean, so, I don't agree a lot with Michael Brown's theology. It's sort of a Jewish form of dispensationalism that, he believes, he says he's Jewish, he should keep Shabbat, he should keep the feast, only he should eat clean food. You and I would differ with him, but he wrote a great book a while ago called Our Hands Are Stained with Blood, which just it's almost as if some of these individuals who now have eyes to see and ears to hear that they are part of Israel.
Right. That's the key word.
They're branches grafted into the tree. And Romans 11 is like, look, these natural branches, they're broken off. They are going to be grafted in again. Zechariah will be fulfilled.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be fulfilled. Now, it's not going to be fulfilled until the end. And then where Paul talks about all Israel will be saved.
Mm-hmm.
That includes the house of Judah and those that currently reject Yeshua as Messiah. But how in the world are like, it was interesting, Doug, on the way over, for about the first 3 hours in the flight, I was sitting by a young man. He was probably in his late 20s. He had immigrated to America. He was originally from Venezuela. I could tell he was Orthodox. He said he was studying Torah up at a big school in New Jersey, like the largest school for Torah. After a while in this conversation, I could tell what he's really studying is Talmud. Because I would discuss scripture with him, and this young man who supposedly is doing this lifelong study, he had no clue what was in Zechariah. He had no clue what was in Hosea. He had no clue. He did know when we would limit it just to Genesis through Deuteronomy, he was aware of those passages. Like he knew them very well. But he had no clue about the prophets or the Psalms or the writings. It's like they're indoctrinated into this. And again, I don't blame Orthodox Jews like that might be raised in New York right now or over times past for rejecting the Roman version that's been presented to them of Messiah. I can't blame them for that. Right. I mean, I pray that their eyes would be open, but if you have this people group of 20 million, however many supposed Jews there are right now, and you've got a bunch of so-called believers, and again, it's not my job to judge them either, but now calling them fake Jews or Rothschild, Kabbalah conspiracists, it just makes my blood boil.
I hear you. There, a couple of years ago, there was a few guys that were making a big stink about the Noahide laws and saying, "Oh, these are going to be what will bring in the end times and all this different stuff." And it kind of made my blood boil as well. So I just thought I'd bring
I
up
was
here.
listening to a few about that. So
Ski the Hebrew says, "Shalomi homies." I thought that was kind of funny. And then Ingrid says, I have a friend whose family lost lots of land when Israel became a state. He's a Palestinian Christian, but he despises Israel. He insists that modern day Israeli government is the Khazarian mafia. So I understand that. I get it. But I also want to point out there are many Israeli Arabs, okay, who,
Sephardic.
well, they're
Oh, yeah.
Israel,
Okay.
they're Arabs, okay, they're
Right.
Arabs, but they're Israeli citizens, okay. So they've taken a different path. Instead of siding with Palestine, they've decided to become part of Israel, and they realize that things are better. You have a higher standard of living. It's just better all around to join him instead of trying to beat him. And again, I understand it is complicated, and I have an appreciation for people that lost land, and I can understand why there's a hatred. I get that, but at some point we have to say, what, it is what it is. The people of Israel are not going to leave. They're not going to decide to just all get a ticket on a boat and float somewhere else. It's not going to happen. Let's be clear. Nobody in Europe wanted the Jews. It wasn't only Hitler that was anti-Semitic. It was very much the Austrians, the Hungarians,
Ukrainians,
the Ukrainians, the Italians, the French,
Russians.
okay, the Polish, right? They all were like, it's terrible what Hitler's doing, but hey, at least he's taking care of this Jewish problem. All right, so it was really, really complicated, and some people were able to get out of Europe. They got on a boat and they had nowhere to go. And sometimes some of them had to go back because various countries, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think even the United States would not take in some, if memory serves me. But, they went to many, many places and they could not find a place to get off the boat. So, it's definitely complicated. And as far as God is concerned, he didn't, in fact, give the land to the nation of Israel, right? And so, that's just a theological fact. It's a historical fact. That's not going to change. Now, what is the solution in the interim? I have no idea. But I know the guy who does. His name is Jesus, okay? And he is going to come back and he's going to set up his kingdom. And the harsh reality is that we're going to have some tough times between here and there. Now, some people have, I've kind of heard it and they've emailed me and, Doug, is this it? Is this the end? I do not think so. I don't think that the Hamas-Israel war is the Gog and Magog war. I don't even think that we're at the beginning of, if you are someone who subscribes to the 70th week of Daniel, which I do, I don't think we're there yet. I think this is very significant. I think this could, leave an indelible mark on history, and I think it certainly will. I think it's vile and awful and ugly and terrible what's happening, but I don't think that this is the beginning of the end. Okay, I think this is yet one more brick in the wall towards something, but I don't think that we're getting there yet. And
right now, it's still minor and limited, although it could mushroom in
it could,
very little time.
And I'm happy to say I was wrong if this turns into something huge. I mean, it is interesting that Hezbollah is doing some saber rattling, suggesting that they're going to do a whole lot more. If so, Iran could get into that. But let's just take a little stroll down memory lane, okay? Because this isn't the first time that something like this has happened. I remember back in 2005. This is when I was a pre-tribber. I was convinced that Iran was this close to actually getting a nuclear bomb. They were talking big talk. President Ahmadinejad, he was saying how he was going to wipe Israel off the map, and he was going to take care of the big Satan, that's the United States, and the little Satan, that's Israel. In just one fell swoop, he was going to do all that. And they were imagining a world without Zionism. all this stuff. There was a lot of talk, and not just talk, but they were actually taking steps. As far as we could tell, they were taking steps to make this a reality. So this is not the first time that we've had a conflict. None of us knows where this is going to go. And so, I would always just urge caution. All right. Because I know there's people out there that have kind of been setting dates, as much as they say they're not setting dates, but they are setting dates. Even the morning of last Saturday, I got an email from someone saying, "Hey, Doug, I told you so." And basically, don't you think it's time to, finally listen to the truth and all this?
Yeah,
And
but
I still reject that. I still don't think that I don't think we're there, but I think we
not
are
even
getting closer.
we know who we're talking about there, but there was a guy. He was on the show, one of the very first shows I did with you, that he had set September 22nd as the date the abomination of desolation would be set up on the Mount of Olives, which I do believe the Mount of Olives is a holy place. And so I was over there and actually emailed.
So let's be clear. He said September 22nd, 2023. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
That was in his book.
Okay, you were there. You were there.
Semi-vague about what it was, semi-vague about what exactly the abomination of desolation would be. I kind of gleaned on the way over there. I kind of skimmed his book because it's free to me because I get Amazon Kindle, and so I get free books. I read your books for free and stuff like that. And so I skimmed it, and he wasn't very clear about what exactly he thought the abomination was. But I kind of gleaned he really thinks he was thinking that it would be when they do the red heifer sacrifice on the Mount of Olives. And it's interesting. I went to Shiloh and I saw the 3 red heifers that are still under qualification to do the red heifer sacrifice. And I believe that's what he thought would be the abomination, would be the red heifer sacrifice. And there's another guy, I've listened to him, and again, he was also setting September 22nd up. He believed the abomination of desolation was going to be like a nuclear bomb that came in. So you have all these people. I mean, again, both of these guys know their scriptures, but I just think they start to teach. And then it's like this gentleman who I'm not going to say his name right now, but I think about the 10th time he told me I don't understand. I finally got frustrated and I said, so-and-so, it's not that I don't understand your premise.
Yeah.
It's that I don't agree with your premise. I don't agree with your arguments. Time will tell. But, then he started backtracking when things didn't happen on September 22nd. But he was very firm that was the date based on when the UN implemented the WHO and the lockdowns in 2020. That started his countdown, and he counted up to so many days. He got to September 22nd and was, by golly, it's going to happen. And then when it didn't happen, of course, I went on his YouTube channel and he was getting mockers and scoffers, and I didn't do that to him. I just said, but I emailed him and he emailed me back and asked if I wanted to meet in Jerusalem and wander around Mount of Olives. I'm like, no, that's okay. You let me know where it is, and if it's set up, I'll go see it. And then he actually was trying to get out of Israel. I saw his last post. He was trying to get out, trying to make it to Jordan and then get out. So down through a lot.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. We're all looking for the end. And when it finally does happen, nobody's going to be going around saying, I told you so, because we're all either going to be running for our lives, or we're going to be getting our heads lopped off, or we're going to do our very best, to protect our family and our property, whatever it may be, or we're going to be so, watching what the 2 witnesses are doing. Or I don't know. There's all kinds of different scenarios, but we just got to be very, very careful. And that's why when we have people that come on the show and they're very adamant about, when it's going to happen. This is, just so people know, this is Joe Dumont that we're talking about. I mean, he was on the show. He did make these big, bold claims. We're still here, whatever that means. I don't know. And again, it's not that we don't understand what he's saying. It's just we didn't agree with the conclusion. Think he's, a nice guy, but we got to be very careful.
Very, very nice guy.
And, when we have Brother Tim that comes on and is adamant that King Charles is the Antichrist, again, we like to talk about these different ideas because they're fun and they get us to think about things and maybe think outside the box, but we've got to be very careful. What I try to do in my books is I try to lay out the scripture as best I can, but I refrain from start putting current names on these different characters, because then I'm going outside of my authority base, my understanding, and that's where we get in trouble. Okay, so it's one thing to argue from scriptures that X, Y, and Z are going to happen, but then we start saying it's going to be in this place with this person specifically. That's when you start getting into big trouble.
Well, and again, the very first show I did with you was on this 7-day plan, and
Mm-hmm.
and nothing is weakening my conviction or understanding. But the one thing I'm not going to do is go on record and say 100% by golly, Yeshua is going to return between 2027 and 2033 or 34. In other words, I'm never going to be dogmatic on it unless and until I see no doubt what is the abomination of desolation. The two witnesses, who I believe does include the both houses, we're testifying. Maybe there's two superhuman prophets, but until I see that, I'm not going to get real firm on any dates. In other words, I'll if me and you are still chatting in 2034 and nothing has really happened, I'll just say either A, things were wrong, or our calendar's more whacked out than I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, we've got a brother on here, Mark. I think he joined us one time that he believes it's next year will kick off the final 3.5 years. He's pretty dogmatic on it. I tend to be more wiggly. Like Stephanie pointed out, that these 2030 dates for the UN and everything. Again, I don't think that's coincidence that's going to be about 2 days or 2,000 years after Yeshua returned to his place. My friend, I still won't say his name right now, but Messiah 2030, the guy that put that out, he makes some very convincing arguments. He put together a well-produced video of the things that I've been studying and believing since I was a kid, and kind of put together in that very first show we did, Doug. I mean, he did a great job on it. Now, I think he should have added question marks behind the title of the movie, or the films. In other words, Messiah 2030 question mark. Because I was actually listening last night as I was going to bed. I was so tired, but I was listening to a rebuttal, Messiah 2028. Why Messiah 2030 is wrong by 2 years? No, and there's another brother that he tunes in and watches us. He's pretty adamant that 2028 is the
Yeah.
year. Another one's
Yeah.
dogmatic that it's 2027. For some reason, 2029 gets no love. I mean, our brother Gavin, he's like 2032.
Yeah.
Doug Krieger's at 2033 right now, but none of them are like out on the mountaintop saying, "Sell your houses."
Right.
Where this is definitely it. So,
Right.
but we should be watching.
Sure. Well, I mean, I wrote a paper myself. This was back when I was a pre-tribber, but I wrote a paper suggesting that 1948 was the the budding of the fig tree, the beginning of it, and that this generation that sees the budding of it will by no means pass away. And so 1948 plus 70 or 80 per Psalm 90 takes you to 2018 or 2028. I've definitely tapered down on that idea. I never told anybody to sell their house or quit their job, but now I'm considering the idea that 2048, and then backtrack 3 years, if for the abomination of desolation, would take us to 2045, which has been a very interesting date put out by the transhumanists, suggesting that is when we are going to become transhuman or posthuman, as it were, that we will transcend our humanity. So, I think that's an interesting date. But here's the bottom line. The transhumanists are changing their dates as well, because they don't
They're
care.
moving them
They
back.
don't. There's no specific date that they have to do. I mean, Kurzweil is now suggesting it's going to be 2030 or 2032 or something like that. I mean, we don't know exactly when all this stuff is going to happen. That's why we're told that no one knows the day or the hour, which is probably a reference to the Feast of Trumpets. But still, in the big term, we don't know the day or the hour. We can know the time. We can know the season. Paul says that, brethren, I have no need to write to you concerning the times and the seasons, for yourselves know that the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night. Right. So We don't know exactly when, but we
But
can have a sense that, hey, I think we're in that, and that's what we talk about in the show is the time and the season. Okay, that
well,
we're pretty sure we're in the season, but we don't know the day or the
I'm,
hour.
I'm choir preaching to you, but I believe that the reason Paul wrote that is he had already taught the Thessalonians about the Moedim. I mean, in other words, he had taught them that Yeshua fulfilled Passover. He fulfilled first fruits. Look, hey, by the way, guys, Pentecost was not a new thing, that happened on this feast called Shavuot. And so when he says that, I believe, again, it would be wonderful if we actually had some Hebrew, the Hebrew, if he even wrote it in Hebrew. But that word seasons, the Greek word there, if you trace it back to the Hebrew, it's the moed, it's the appointed times. And so that's one thing you and I are pretty
Mm-hmm.
dogmatic on. And I think we can
Exactly.
be dogmatic on that. There is no imminent rapture.
Right.
There is no imminent gathering. In other
Right.
words, prophecy will be fulfilled on these appointed times, the major events. Now, could there be, and I'd love to maybe do another discussion on this in the future about how, and maybe have Steve Motry on again from Torah family.org, used to be with 119, to discuss Shavuot and sort of his thinking outside the box, which I don't necessarily agree with him, but like he says, a lot of times he disagrees with himself a week ago, and he might disagree with. He's just really just trying to understand it and watching and just having some different interpretations maybe than Yom Teruah being the day that we're gathered. But I do
Mm-hmm.
think that just as I believe Yeshua partially fulfilled all 7 of the Moedim in his first coming, like as far as I believe he was born on Yom Teruah.
Mm-hmm.
Maria makes a great argument that with him being born at the very last part, he actually got circumcised on Yom Kippurim, which starts on the 9th. That he would have been circumcised, and so there was in that he also in Luke 4, when he pronounced the Jubilee, that would have been on Yom Kippurim. He was out in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. He comes in, and I believe that would have been happening on Yom Kippurim. And so I believe there was a lot of prophecy that was partially fulfilled in his first coming, but I believe these Moedim, I think that's the one thing we can be dogmatic on. And my friend Curtis and Michael, they're like, if someone is not basing their prophecy teaching on his appointed times, then I'm not saying you can't glean information from them, but they really don't need to be put too much stock in. And here's the cool thing, Doug, is a lot of the Christian dispensationalists who still believe in the preacher of rapture, by the way, like Craig Bong, we had him on. He was a King Charles's Antichrist guy. He believes we're getting raptured out of here in December. So, and he bases that on I believe his incorrect understanding of not understanding when winter begins in Israel. He believes it begins in December because Josephus
Mm-hmm.
said it was cold. There's only winter and summer in scripture. There's no spring and fall. And so he just believes like the 99.99% of us are completely incorrect on when Yom Teruah is. And so he thinks it's in December and that we're getting raptured out of here. So I told him, I said, if and when we're still here in January, you want to come on the show? He said he would. So yeah, he's adamant
Yeah.
that 2030 is the date for Yeshua's return.
Yeah.
And so he's a dogmatic dispensational preacher of God.
Yeah.
Nice guy, very nice guy.
Hey, let's turn our attention a little bit to the whole idea of the Gog-Magog war, because there are a number of people. I used to be one of them that is firmly of the belief that where it says the Prince of Rosh uh, is Russia. Okay, I used to hold to that idea. Now I'm much more of the opinion that it's the chief prince, spoken there in Ezekiel chapter 38, 39. So, there are some people that think, okay, this is what we're seeing right now is basically a power play by Russia. They are sort of pulling the strings behind. We're going to see this escalation, and then Russia is going to make their advance towards Israel, and that'll be the Gog-Magog war. I certainly do not hold that opinion anymore. I am firmly of the belief that the Gog-Magog war is the same exact war as Armageddon. All right, and that Gog is in fact the beast or the Antichrist. I believe I prove that in Corrupting the Image, Volume 3. where I talk about the meaning of his name, that it comes from Sumerian, and it means enmity or death. It's actually an intensification of the name Ug, which is the same as Og, which means death or enmity. And this is the one that God has spoken of by all his prophets throughout the years. And I remember when I was looking at that, I'm like, wait, where did God ever talk about this guy named Gog? Well, if you understand that he is death and enmity, which there in Genesis 3:15, I will cause enmity between you and the woman. So it's Satan and or a hybrid of Satan, which again, I've argued is the beast, that he will be a hybridized version of Satan. That that's who we're really getting at. So I would say that the Gog-Magog war cannot and will not happen until the very end, and then Gog himself will be destroyed by Jesus. He'll be destroyed at the second coming, and and that's where that whole battle is going to take place. And so, any thoughts on that?
I mean, again, I'm not a linguist like you, and I didn't do the research. I thought your studies and your research was well done, and certainly I believe the Gog is more of a title than it is a location. I think Magog is Turkey. A lot of people, Great Commission just posted it in chat. That is the area known as Turkey, and it might be bigger than the current nation state of Turkey. I believe it includes the stands. I call them the stands. I don't think it's any coincidence that they're all Islamic countries. So between Turkey, Iran, the stands, you don't need Russia to be part of this invasion. You've got Sudan, you've got the other Muslim countries in the south, and I just find it fascinating that Egypt, what we would now call modern day Saudi Arabia, and some of the other Arab countries that are Sunni, they're not part of this attack that occurs. They're watching and concerned about what's happening. So again, I'm hoping that maybe we've got some more time and Hezbollah doesn't get involved, and there's not like a
right.
I'm hoping that Iran doesn't. But I mean, that's what they've been doing the past few years, Doug, is moving military equipment. That's why Israel's been hitting Syria. It's essentially a little proxy war, and it's a very delicate situation.
That's right.
And we do know at the very end, all the nations will come. Now, does that mean America is somehow going to come against? Well, there'd have to be some major policy shifts, which, if we've learned anything in the last 10 or 15 years from when Barack Obama was against certain people getting married to now where we are now as a nation, and men used to be men and women. I mean, I don't put anything past this country or any country just going to hell in a handbasket faster than we can think it will. So, but it does say all the nations come against Jerusalem. And again, that's when we know when Yeshua told the leadership of the house of Judah, not every Jew, but those that were the Sadducees, the Pharisees that were part of the Sanhedrin, when he said, your house is left to you desolate. You will not see me again until you cry out, Baruch Hashem, help me out here.
Yeah, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai.
Yeah, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Right. And so that's Zechariah being fulfilled. I mean, Yeshua knew where he was quoting from. He is the word of God. And so that will, at the very end, when all hope seems lost for our brothers Judah, when everybody's against them, I mean, they will cry out. They will.
That's right. That's right.
And so that's why it irritates me so much with these Hebrew uprooters and messy antics who are now, claiming that the Jews that are now in the current nation state of Israel are all fake Jews. They're all the synagogue of Satan. And it's just that irritates me. At the same point in time, I get a little bit irritated with my dispensational brothers who still can't see that they're Israel too. Like when I see a post,
God help us.
Well, when I see a post that says pray for Israel, I'm like, of course we should pray for Israel. We are Israel. That includes Romans 11. That includes those natural branches who have been broken off due to their unbelief in Yeshua, but will be grafted back again, and then
Right.
all Israel will be saved.
So what's interesting about this is that, for the last 2,000 years, more or less, the entity that we know as Israel, and I'm going to leave that a little bit vague for the moment, has been, outside of the land, has been dispersed, etc. Right, and so Israel has still existed as an idea. It's existed within the people of the house of Judah, and also it has existed as, quote unquote, the church, okay, as people have come into faith through Messiah. He's the door. In fact, this kind of I had this epiphany today, and I'm like, why did I not see this ages ago? All right, so I'm teaching in John chapter 10, right? And Jesus said, hey, I'm the good shepherd, right? And all who've tried to come before and go around and come from the outside, they're thieves and liars, all right? And I was like, okay, so Messiah is the good shepherd. I went back to Ezekiel 34, where God is talking about how the shepherds ought to feed the flock, but they haven't been. They've been fleecing the flock and eating the flock. And I'm like, oh my goodness, the flock is Israel. All right. The sheep are Israel. And then God says, I myself am going to go out and I'm going to look for my lost sheep and bring them back to me. Jesus then says he only came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So then I'm thinking, okay, the sheep that are in this little sheepfold, they're Israel. All right. Now, where the way I grew up is I was always hearing, well, sheep are believers and Jesus came to, save us all. And I'm like, okay, I don't dispute that. But there's a deeper story here, which is that God is bringing us into the commonwealth of Israel. So he has cared about Israel the whole time, but now we're at the end of all things, right? I'm not saying we're at the very end, but we're at, the end of the end. We're at the beginning of the end or somewhere in there, maybe the middle of the end. I don't know. But, we're coming up toward the end of this age where now Israel, the nation, which is in large part populated by the house of Judah, all right, they are back in the land. There is a government there, and it's significant that it is Judah. You mentioned this already, Scott, but it's significant that it's Judah because Judah, they're the ones who, as a national governing body, rejected Jesus. And again, I mean that the leaders rejected Jesus, not the populace, but the leaders rejected Jesus, and he gave them an ultimatum in Matthew 23. He says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, and he gives them all these woes. And he says, you will not see me again until you say, as you said it, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, right? So they have to say that before he can come back. That's what's so astounding about this, right? And somebody else said that in the comments. I've written about that in my books, right? You've mentioned it as well, Scott. They cannot come. Jesus will not come back until the leadership of Judah says, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. All right. So, all the things that we're seeing now, the wars and the rumors of wars and all this stuff, this is all leading up to a climactic moment when they finally cry out and they say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, you are the king. We acknowledge you, Yeshua. And then it says in Zechariah that they're going to weep. They're going to mourn for him as one mourns for an only son. Here's the other thing that's interesting is in the Talmud and other places, it talks about Messiah, son of Joseph, that he would be the suffering servant. He would be the one that would fight Gog and Magog, and he would die in that battle. And they ascribe Zechariah 12, where it says that they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only son. They ascribe that to the death of Messiah ben Joseph. Now, a quick quiz, okay, pop quiz for everybody. What was the name of Jesus' adoptive father? Hold on. I'll give you a second to think about that.
And grandfather.
Joseph.
Okay, on the maternal side, and grandfather.
That's right. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is astounding, right? That he was in fact the son of Joseph as well, right? So he was the Messiah, son of Joseph, the one who would suffer, who would die. And it was also prophesied in the rabbinic teachings that he would come back on the third day, right? So this is not just New Testament Christian stuff. This is stuff that the Jews were understanding in relationship to Messiah, son of Joseph. All right. Now, the problem is when we Christians present Jesus, we always talk about him being Messiah, son of David. And indeed, he is Messiah, son of David, but he's also Messiah, son of Joseph. And, so in their own prophecies, their own studies and teachings, they are already looking for someone who would do that. And it's in the person of Yeshua.
And in their defense, I mean, Messiah did not fulfill all the messianic prophecies. He did not, and that's where in Acts, when Peter asked him, "Is it now that you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel?" Now, of course, as a dispensationalist growing up as a little boy and everything, I didn't understand that. Peter fully well understood the prophecies and how Messiah would gather all of the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Isaiah 11, he would gather Ephraim and Judah. There would no longer be this jealousy and this tension and this animosity between the two houses. And so Peter was thinking, are you doing it now? And Yeshua told him, no, it's not for you to know right now. And I think later on it was revealed to Peter when he wrote 2 Peter. I believe he's all but screaming because he's talking about the return of Yeshua. And he's saying in the latter days, mockers and scoffers will come. They'll deny the creation. That didn't happen until about 200 or 300 years ago. They'll deny the flood. That didn't happen until a lawyer decided he wanted to be a geologist and determined that uniformitarianism, rivers flow uphill and form the Grand Canyon, as opposed to there being a catastrophic event, a dam burst. And you see that in the little mini St. Helens Canyon. And so, and he tells them, God is not slow about his promises.
That's right.
Do not be ignorant of this one fact. And so that's one reason I'm not dogmatic like 100% on it, but I don't think we're witnessing what we're witnessing. You and I talking about this, you and I now understanding that Shabbat and his Moedim are applicable to us as opposed to Sunday and Easter and Christmas. I've gotten a little lighter and more understanding as I came out of a little Torah terrorism stage, but it doesn't change the truth of this, that yes, these are his appointed times and he wants to keep them as dress rehearsals for what is coming.
Right.
And so, it's just everything. I like to say that Deuteronomy 4 and Deuteronomy 30 are in the infancy stages still. They might be in the adolescent stage right now of being fulfilled as more and more, like our little congregation here in Birmingham has grown out of like 200 people. We had over 200 attend the Yom Teruah service. We had over 100 that did Sukkot all week. And these are a bunch of Baptists and like people that grew up Baptist, Pentecostal, Catholic, or whatever. And now all of a sudden we're just forming a congregation and understanding that we are Israel, but not replacing Judah.
Right. So Tiki 71 says the Islamic Beast Empire went away in 1923, 100 years ago, created the conditions to put the Jews back into the land, WW2, and Turkey really wants to revive it. They conquered the Eastern Roman Empire. I thought that was interesting. I mean, there's probably a lot of things we could talk about in that regard.
2 legs. It's the 2 legs. Rome never went away. She just morphed into the holy, which it wasn't holy,
right.
Roman Empire. And as
there's the Byzantine Empire, and then that was conquered by the Muslims or the Turks, right? So
she never went away. She just
that's right.
I mean, you don't see Rome being destroyed in the Daniel 2 statue until Yeshua returns. Well, I think we're at the 10 toe stages right now.
Yeah, I think we're getting really, really close, right? We must be getting super duper close. It's pretty interesting, how all that's coming together. We'll see. I mean, certainly Erdogan has some desire to kind of get back in there. So another one said, I thought that was kind of funny. Harry says, I think Satan may have 2032 penciled in, but God determines the timing. And that is very, very important, right? God is the only one who gets to decide when the curtain goes up. All Satan can do is have the stage set to the best of his ability, but he doesn't know when the curtain's going up, right? So that's absolutely God's prerogative. God is the one who will allow Jesus there to take the scroll and to start breaking the seals, and that's when it all starts happening and becomes biblical, as you like to say.
Or some of them already be broken, and again, that's where me and you differ on that. I believe we could be in the final 7 years of this age, because I'm not looking for an antichrist to make a covenant with the many. So I believe we could already be in the final 7 years. The only event I'm really looking toward before I ever set a date would be if there's no doubt, I said it earlier, no doubt, by golly, this is the abomination of desolation standing in the holy topos.
Yep.
The topos. It's not naos. It's not the Greek word for temple. It's a place. And and I'm not dogmatic on where that place is. I don't believe it's been put in place yet. I mean, in spite of what Joe said and some of these other people have said, so I think it happens on a future Passover, by the way, or during the spring Moedim, because that just dovetails in nicely with Yeshua returning 3.5 years later on a Yom Teruah.
I hear you.
And there were some people mentioning some conspiracy theories, and again, and to your point, Doug, as far as Satan and everything, Satan can't do anything unless Yah allows it. And so when we see these seals being broken, it's Yeshua breaking the seals. So whether or not what I still believe maybe the first seal was the pandemic and everything, and I don't think it ever stops riding. If the events with Russia and now America and the West depleting our military capabilities, and you got the rise of Islam in China, I mean, within a week, the whole situation could blow up and change. But until it happens, I wouldn't be dogmatic that we are definitely in the second seal. So we haven't seen worldwide famine yet. We're definitely not in the third seal, but everything's in place. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So NATO was mentioning this quote from Albert Pike, which I think is really interesting. And I actually have the entire quote. I was just trying to pull that up. So, of course, there's some discussion as to, where this quote actually came from. But I thought it'd be kind of fun. Just we could, kind of take a look at this and see what we think. Maybe we'll learn something. Who knows?
And
So
to that point,
let me pull this up here. I just want to. I'm trying to share my screen and do all those little back office things. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is from Albert Pike. That's this guy. He was, a 33rd degree Mason, so people understand that. He says the First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agenter agents of the Illuminati between the British and Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. World War II must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which must then be restrained and held in check until the time when we need it for the final social cataclysm. Now, before I go to World War III, let me just remind people that there's something known as a dialectic. Okay, so there's a thesis, there's an antithesis, and then we have synthesis. All right. So what he's laying out here is you have a thesis, then an antithesis, and now we're going to lead to the synthesis. Okay. So in the final one here, what he says is the Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agenter of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the state of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere, the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light, think Satan, through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, Satan, brought finally out in the public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. So, it's this is where when I hear people say, "Oh, Islam is going to be like they are the agent of Antichrist," I'm like, no, I don't think so. That there will be wars and stuff between Israel and Muslims, yes. But and I think Albert Pike, or at least whoever wrote that, it's ascribed to him, that there's going to be, again, thesis, antithesis until we get to synthesis. So in the eyes of Albert Pike, who wrote that, or the author thereof, the synthesis is the eventual manifestation, open for all to see, of Lucifer or Satan, and that's what we would know. That's what the Bible calls the beast, or the dragon giving his authority to the beast, etc. So it's kind of an interesting quote, somewhat
And
debated, but
and I've made this point earlier when I do believe there is a satanic Luciferian conspiracy, and at the upper levels, and I'm going to go ahead and include Roman Catholicism, Islam, and Judaism, the Kabbalah, like, in other words, those at the upper echelon, at the very top of this food chain, they know who they worship. They worship Lucifer. And that's where Freemasonry came in. But again, we can't lump in all Muslims. Again, I had a great conversation with a Muslim man from Egypt. His name was Muhammad, for about an hour. I mean, and probably 99% of Muslims are not these true believers that want to exterminate all Jews or hate all Christians and behead. We're not, not every Muslim is a terrorist. Certainly not every Jew is a Kabbalah Luciferian.
that's right.
And I just, it's almost like, yes, is there a satanic conspiracy? Yes, but we're not to fear that conspiracy.
That's right.
I think
Yeah.
it's Isaiah 8, or it's either
Yeah.
Isaiah 8 or
Yeah.
Isaiah 11.
Yeah, the
And
conspiracy.
so, is there a conspiracy in which the world global elite, those at the upper levels of this Luciferian agenda, are all in cahoots with one another? I have no doubt about it. It's just, how can we really know? And I'm certainly not going to cast the local Jewish rabbi in Birmingham and the local Jewish population in Birmingham and condemn them, or either the Muslims here, or the Roman Catholics, or
yeah, most of them just want to raise their families and have a good job and just do human stuff. That's what most of them are trying to do. I learned that as well when I was living in Israel. I met a lot of very wonderful Muslims. I met some very nice Palestinians as well. So we've got to be very, very careful that we don't broad brush, and paint everybody as being on the side of Satan because they're not on my side or something like that. It's more complicated than that.
The young man that drove me from one location to another location close to the old city, he was a Palestinian. He lived in the old city, actually. And because they didn't have a car for me on King David Street, he drove me over to a parking lot, or I guess they parked their cars, and we had a great little conversation. He's like, "Are you a Christian?" I said, "Well, I believe in Yeshua as Messiah." So he was actually interested, and we had a good little talk about that. And so I got to share with him a little bit. And
that's really a great idea, because when you say Christian, then you sort of have to own all of the bad things that Christianity has done. You have to be personally responsible for the Inquisition. You're personally responsible for the Holocaust, because these were done by Christians and all this. And so it's good. It's good advice to say, I'm a guy that follows Yeshua or Jesus, So this is from James. He says, how do you explain what is written on the Pope's hate vicar of Christ, which is in the stead of Yeshua? Numerated, it comes up to 666 in Latin and Greek. Well, I mean, I personally, I think that that the Roman Catholic Church, the head of the Roman Catholic Church, is part of the problem. I don't think they are the problem. Okay, again, they're part of the problem. Just I think New York City is part of the problem. I think Hollywood is part of the problem. I think Russia and America are part of the problem, but I don't think they are the problem. And as far as numerology is 666, man, there's a lot of stuff that comes up as 666 if you just plug it in the right way. And so I'm very skeptical of just plugging it in the right way. Now, if you guys are interested, if you want to check out my thoughts on that, I've done some extensive research. It's in Corrupting the Image Volume 3. And I show all kinds of scientific things. I show a lot of linguistic things as well. I'll let you be the judge. Okay, that's up to you. But I'm not convinced that the Pope himself is the Antichrist.
Oh,
is he a bad player? Maybe. Okay, maybe. I don't have a problem with that.
He's still my favorite candidate for the false prophet, though.
And and that could be.
I'm just saying he would be the number one, whoever the vicar is, which means anti-Messiah. I mean, it just does. He claims to be. He claims to be able to speak infallibility. I mean, it's. The Roman, even Constantine wasn't that bad. This grew over time, like religion does. Like the Judaism that the young man that sat on the airplane by me, that he's been taught, in no way even resembles the Judaism that you mentioned, Rabbi Akiva.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, that sort of was the start. As that revolt happened, it separated all the Jewish people that believed in Yeshua, because they actually knew the scripture, and they got the heck out of Jerusalem, and they would not follow the rabbi and not declare Bar Kokhba as the Messiah. So that started the rift even worse between these two religions that ultimately developed Christianity and Judaism. And they all, and this, everybody probably listening to this knows, they all have many flavors. I mean, you go over to Israel and you'll see ultra Orthodox, you'll see Orthodox, you'll see conservatives, you'll see a lot of Israelis not wearing kippahs. It's a grab bag of, but religion both have strayed so far off the path. That's why I like to say, I'm a follower of Yeshua. He's the Word of God made flesh. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Just do what he says.
Well said. Well, according to Trey, Gog and Magog is judgment after 1,000 years. Seriously, lol. Who are these people? Okay. Unfollow these men of Mystery Babylon, because I'm sure that they've taken that oath or two. Okay.
Well, he's getting that from Revelation 20. And again, Ezekiel 38 and 39 are hard passages, I think.
Sure.
There is a problem, because it does say that this army that invades is invading a nation of unwalled villages. So obviously there's been theories proposed that there will be this future covenant with the many, in which Israel will no longer need its military or whatever. Now, I've always thought that even if that were to happen, there had to be some heck of a war in which nukes are used, or EMPs, or biological weapons, which is so horrible that the whole world.
The word batach, it can also be bitachon. Bitachon is the word for security. So, it says that it's not that they're dwelling in safety necessarily, but they're dwelling in security, right? And so that's another way to look at it, that, and I think you could argue that Israel today is probably the most secure, maybe not today, like as of this week, because of the
Well,
war that's been
after
happening.
Saturday morning.
Yeah, maybe that's a big exception, but still, as a people group over the last 2,000 years, have they ever been this well secured? No, they've been quite exposed. They've not had any kind of military standing in any country, right? They have been, the outcasts. They have been the ones that have been just trying to keep their head down and not to be noticed too much, and to not get picked on. And so, Israel is in a place where they can truly fight back. I would say, being able to muster 300,000 reservists, that's a lot of bitachon. That is a lot of security. And if you, and I show this in Cryptic Language 3, that the word bitachon or batach, which is the same word there, that it doesn't always refer to someone who is impregnable, right? You actually see that, I forget which country it was, but I think it was Edomite or somebody, but they're saying that they are dwelling in safety. And then like in the very next sentence, they're getting decimated. Right. So it just means that they're comfortable. They feel that there's a certain sense of, okay, we're all right, but we're actually prepared for war. So, I think we could probably go back and revisit that word, and kind of take a deeper look at that. And as far as Gog, if my theory is correct, that Gog is referring to, because it's a Sumerian word, I challenge anybody to come up with the actual Hebrew for the word Gog. You're not going to find it. But by all means, go ahead. According to my research, it is a Sumerian word. Sumerian is probably the oldest language in the world, and it means enmity or death. All right. So based on that, who does that fit like a glove? Well, Satan, of course. Satan was the king of death. He was the god of death. Again, there's lots and lots of literature that talks about that. I show the linguistics of it. I show the literature that's talking about that. And so Gog is a reference to Satan / the beast at the time of the tribulation. And then after the 1,000 years, it is Satan, because he is the main player. He's the one that God is really talking about. The beast simply becomes a tool in the hands of the dragon, in the hands of Satan, because we know that the dragon is going to give his power, throne, and authority to who? To the beast, right? So the beast is simply a tool that he's using to accomplish his own goals. And so I show the linguistic connection between the word Gog, or the name Gog, or title, if you will, and Satan. So,
and I'm sure we've done this in the past 2 or 3 years. We've probably discussed the Gog and Magog war and whether or not that would be the Battle of Armageddon. And I know we've talked about that on this show before, as far as your understanding. And I believe you're 100% correct. It's not in the big valley that 5 years ago when I went out there and went up on the tell and looked down and go, oh, one day the armies are going to come. Now they may use that out. That's a route. I mean, an avenue. And just from being on Mount Hermon, I mean,
sure.
there's you can tell where the northern armies are going to come from, and it's going to be through that pass right there. So right there, there's a wall, and so it was interesting. And one reason my wife was so mad at me is because I really thought something might go down while I was there, and she was so mad on Saturday when she said, "You knew they were." I'm like, "Oh man." Let me get safe, okay? I'm driving from a lot up to Tel Aviv, and she's just in my ear, just yapping at me. So.
Oh man, Scott, we're out of time, but before we go, I want to just invite people, if they're interested. A lot of the things that we've been talking about, I've put into a novel called Regenesis Code. You can listen to it for free, narrated by yours truly. But you can listen to it on YouTube. So just put in Regenesis Code into the search there in YouTube, and you can listen to it. If you want, you can go to Amazon. You can buy it as a paper book and ebook, or you can go to Audible and get it there as an audiobook as well. But it is for free right now on YouTube. And I would ask you guys to keep this in prayer, because my co-author and I want to make this into a TV series. We believe that the way to really get the message to people about the kingdom of God is to put it in a way, in a medium that people are already using. Of course, that is TV or screens of some sort. We've seen incredible success with The Chosen. Whatever you think about that, whether you like it or hate it, doesn't really matter. A lot of people have watched that, and it's influenced people, right? And so we're trying to do the same thing, but kind of on an end times, action-packed UFO, zombies, and all that kind of fun stuff, type of TV series based on Regenesis Code. We're going to have 4 books all together, and we're really terribly excited about that. And so we're working hard on getting a crowdfunding campaign going. I'll keep you up to date as to when that will be coming out. And if you guys want to sew into that, that'd be fantastic. But please do pray. We'd really appreciate prayers for that. So thank you for that. So until next time, we hope you do well. God bless everyone. And Scott, I'm really glad that you're back, because the show is less fun without you. So glad you're back. But we're going to have some great guests in the near future. We're going to have Derek Gilbert on pretty soon. We're going to have Paul Begley on. He was going to be on several weeks ago. His schedule got all messed up. So that was kind of a bummer. And more to come. So we look forward to it. Until next time, God bless you guys.